By late 1944, the German war machine had convinced itself of its superiority on the battlefield. Panthers, Tigers, and King Tigers were symbols of engineering brilliance, tanks that could outgun, outrun, and outlast anything the Allies could throw at them. Or so they believed. German officers and engineers were confident. Their tanks were technically sophisticated, terrifying in appearance, and deadly in combat. Meanwhile, American forces had been learning hard lessons from years of fighting. The M4 Sherman, reliable and plentiful, was effective, but it struggled against the heavier German armor. In combat reports, soldiers complained that a direct hit from a Panther or Tiger could destroy a Sherman from hundreds of meters away, while Sherman's 75mm guns often struggled to penetrate German tanks. Yet, in Detroit, at the Detroit Arsenal tank plant and other U.S. facilities, engineers had begun a quiet revolution in armored warfare. They were designing a new tank, heavier than the Sherman, better armed, more heavily armored, but above all, reliably American. They called it the M26 Pershing. The Pershing was not flashy, nor was it a showpiece. It was practical, robust, and designed to operate in the chaotic, muddy, and unforgiving environments of European battlefields. Its 90mm M3 gun could penetrate the armor of Panthers and, at certain ranges, even the fabled Tigers. Its armor was thick enough to withstand many German anti-tank weapons. But what truly set it apart was what the Germans would never fully anticipate: its mechanical reliability. German engineers were obsessed with technical superiority. Their tanks were marvels of engineering on paper: sloped armor, high-velocity guns, complex suspension systems. But these tanks were fragile. Panthers and Tigers broke down constantly. They required specialized crews, constant maintenance, and extensive logistical support. On the battlefield, this meant that many German tanks were abandoned not because of enemy fire, but because the transmission failed, the final drive shattered, or engines overheated. By contrast, the M26 Pershing embodied a different philosophy. Built on decades of civilian automotive experience, it used proven components. Its transmission, engine, and tracks were designed to endure long distances, rough terrain, and minimal maintenance. It didn't just survive the battlefield, it endured. When the first Pershings rolled into Europe in early 1945, German troops were unprepared. Reports trickled back to the Wehrmacht headquarters that American forces were deploying a heavy tank capable of engaging Panthers and Tigers with greater success than the Sherman ever could. Many dismissed these reports. Another Sherman variant, they said, underestimating the threat entirely. The Germans would soon learn that the Pershing wasn't just another American tank. It was a machine designed to outlast them, to exploit their obsession with technical perfection, and to expose the fragility of their most feared weapons. The story of the M26 Pershing begins not on the battlefield, but in the factories and design rooms of the United States. By 1943, American military planners understood that the M4 Sherman, while reliable and produced in massive numbers, lacked the firepower and armor to effectively counter the new German Panther and Tiger tanks. The Sherman could hold the line, support infantry, and perform well in numbers, but it could not win a duel against Germany's heaviest armored vehicles. Engineers at the Detroit Arsenal tank plant faced a daunting challenge: build a tank that combined firepower, armor, and mobility without sacrificing reliability. The result was the M26 Pershing, named after General John F. Pershing, a nod to both American military tradition and the ambition behind the design. Its 90mm M3 gun was capable of penetrating Panther and Tiger armor at reasonable ranges, and its hull and turret were reinforced with sloped armor to deflect incoming shells. Unlike the German approach, which often prioritized over-engineering and technical complexity, the Americans focused on practicality. Every component was tested for durability under combat conditions. Engines were designed to run thousands of kilometers without failure.
Transmissions used proven designs, allowing even minimally trained crews to maintain operational readiness. Unlike a Panther, which could become useless after a single transmission failure, the Pershing was built to keep moving. The tank's suspension, tracks, and weight distribution were carefully calculated. American designers understood that European terrain, from mud-soaked forests to cratered roads, would demand a tank that could endure long marches, harsh weather, and prolonged combat. Its 500 horsepower engine, coupled with an advanced torsion bar suspension, allowed it to navigate difficult terrain with fewer breakdowns than any German heavy tank. Testing was rigorous. Prototypes underwent months of trials, including obstacle courses, live-fire exercises, and simulated combat scenarios. Each component was scrutinized for failure points. Engineers discovered that minor design improvements, such as reinforced drives, simplified electrical systems, and better cooling for the engine, could drastically increase combat readiness. By the time that Pershing entered production, it wasn't just a heavier Sherman, it was a new standard for American armored engineering. German intelligence, however, remained skeptical. Reports from spies and reconnaissance often underestimated American industrial capability. They assumed that the Pershing, like previous Shermans, would be mechanically unreliable and only effective in numbers. The Germans would soon learn that the American engineers had taken a different approach: build fewer tanks, but make each one count.
The first Pershings arrived in Europe in early 1945, assigned to the 3rd and 9th Armored Divisions. Soldiers who had spent years relying on the Sherman were both curious and skeptical. How would this heavy tank perform? Would it live up to the hype, or would it succumb to the same mechanical issues that plagued heavier German designs? Their first test came quickly. In February, Pershing crews engaged German defensive positions near the Rohr River. Panthers and Tigers lurked in forests, behind hedgerows, and atop hills. The Germans, confident in their technological superiority, underestimated the new American tanks. The Pershings advanced cautiously, supporting infantry through mud, craters, and wreckage. The 90mm gun proved devastating. Panthers attempting to ambush the Pershings were destroyed from distances that would have been impossible for a Sherman. Tiger crews, expecting an easy target, discovered that the Pershing could return fire effectively, penetrating armor that had repelled countless Allied rounds before. But it wasn't just firepower that impressed. Mechanical reliability became apparent immediately. While German tanks frequently stalled, overheated, or suffered broken transmissions under stress, Pershings kept moving. Engine failures were rare, and maintenance in the field was straightforward. Even minimally trained crews could keep the tanks operational throughout long days of combat. In urban areas, the Pershing's armor and firepower provided a significant advantage. German defenders, accustomed to intimidating Sherman numbers, were surprised to see a tank that could engage them on equal terms. Many reported that the Pershing seemed tougher, more relentless than anything they had faced. The first encounters revealed a pattern. American tanks might not have been as technically sophisticated as a Panther or Tiger in every aspect, but their combination of durability, firepower, and mobility created a battlefield advantage the Germans had not anticipated. By March 1945, word of the Pershing spread among German units. Commanders who once dismissed reports of the tank now recognized a new problem: a vehicle that could survive hits, traverse difficult terrain, and challenge their heaviest armor. For the first time, the Germans faced an American tank that truly leveled the playing field, not through gimmicks or sheer numbers, but through engineering excellence and practical design. One of the most dramatic early tests of the M26 Pershing came during the Battle of Cologne in March 1945. The city, heavily defended by German units, was filled with Panther and Tiger tanks, anti-tank guns, and fortified positions. Urban combat posed unique challenges. Narrow streets, rubble, and hidden ambush points could stop even the most advanced tanks. Pershings from the 3rd Armored Division advanced into Cologne with infantry support. The first contact occurred near the northern outskirts, where German Panther units had set up defensive positions. The Pershings engaged, their 90mm guns piercing the Panther's armor at ranges that would previously have left Shermans vulnerable. German crews were shocked. They had anticipated another Sherman, a tank that could be outgunned or immobilized.
Instead, the Pershings withstood hits that would have disabled lesser vehicles. Tanks that attempted to flank the Pershings found themselves outmatched in both firepower and endurance. Mechanical reliability proved critical. Urban combat required constant movement, sudden turns, and repeated maneuvers over debris. German tanks frequently stalled or broke down under such stress, leaving crews exposed and forcing retreats. Pershings, however, continued to advance, providing a morale boost to American infantry and demonstrating that engineering reliability could win battles, even against technically formidable opponents. Throughout Cologne, the Pershings destroyed multiple Panther and Tiger tanks, neutralized fortified positions, and allowed American forces to secure strategic points. German field reports described their disbelief at the tank's resilience. For many officers, it was the first time they realized that American armored vehicles were no longer inferior. They were now capable of challenging Germany's heaviest machines directly. The true strength of the M26 Pershing lay in the balance between firepower, armor, and mobility. Its 90mm M3 gun was the centerpiece, capable of penetrating the armor of German Panthers and even the formidable Tiger tanks at reasonable combat ranges. Unlike previous American designs, the Pershing's gun could engage German tanks head-on, without requiring flanking maneuvers or close-range ambushes. Armor was another critical advantage. The Pershing's frontal armor ranged from 76 to 102 millimeters, with sloped surfaces designed to deflect incoming rounds. While not invulnerable, it offered far greater protection than the Sherman. German anti-tank crews, accustomed to easily disabling American tanks, were often stunned by the Pershing's ability to sustain hits while returning accurate fire. Mobility completed the trifecta. The M26's 500-horsepower engine, coupled with torsion bar suspension, allowed it to traverse mud, debris, and uneven terrain with surprising agility. German tanks, especially Panthers and Tigers, often struggled in these same conditions. Overheated engines, broken final drives, and complex maintenance requirements slowed them down and took them out of action before combat even began. Field reports highlighted the contrast. In a single engagement near the Rohr River, two Pershings faced a small Panther unit. The Pershings advanced steadily, sustaining minor hits, while one Panther stalled, another broke its track, and the third was destroyed by concentrated fire. The combination of practical engineering, durability, and firepower had effectively neutralized a force that had previously been feared by American crews. The Germans were forced to take notice. Their meticulous engineering, while impressive on paper, had created machines that were often brittle under prolonged stress. The Americans, by contrast, emphasized operational reliability. A tank that could continue fighting after multiple rounds, traverse harsh terrain, and require minimal maintenance was often more valuable than a technically superior but fragile machine. The M26 Pershing proved that balance and practicality could triumph over complexity. It didn't need to be the heaviest, fastest, or most advanced tank. It only needed to survive, advance, and deliver its firepower consistently. In the closing months of the European theater, this approach would repeatedly tip engagements in favor of American armored forces. By early 1945, American intelligence had learned of the Tiger II, the so-called King Tiger, a behemoth with armor that seemed impervious to most Allied weapons. Reports from the front described tanks so massive that Shermans and even Pershings struggled to penetrate their armor. The U.S. Army needed a solution, and quickly. Enter the T-26E4, nicknamed the Super Pershing. This variant featured a longer-barreled 90mm gun, capable of punching through even the thickest Tiger II armor, and additional frontal plating to survive return fire. Only a handful were produced, but in the crucible of combat, they would demonstrate American ingenuity and adaptability. The first encounter came in the forest of Thuringia. A Super Pershing crew, advancing cautiously with infantry cover, spotted a Tiger II entrenched atop a ridge. The German tank fired first, a massive shell tearing through nearby debris, forcing the Pershing to maneuver under heavy fire. Smoke, dust, and the roar of engines filled the air. The Super Pershing fired in response, a single, precise shot piercing the Tiger II's frontal armor.
The German crews scrambled to reposition, but the Pershing's combination of mobility and firepower forced them back. Other German units, previously confident in their armored supremacy, were stunned. A tank they had feared for months was now vulnerable, and the Americans were exploiting weaknesses with methodical precision. Battle after battle revealed the same pattern. While Tigers and Panthers excelled in controlled conditions, their mechanical fragility and the difficulty of coordinating complex units under fire often left them exposed. The Pershings, on the contrary, moved relentlessly, their guns accurate, engines steady, and crews confident. In the chaos of these encounters, the difference became clear. American engineering favored practical, battle-tested design. A tank that could take a hit, keep moving, and strike back was far deadlier than a technically superior machine that stalled at the first sign of trouble. By the end of these engagements, German commanders began recording in their reports a sobering realization. The Pershings, especially the super variant, were not just another tank. They were a force multiplier. A machine capable of turning defensive strongholds into liabilities and challenging even the most feared German heavy armor. March and April of 1945 brought the Pershings into the heart of German cities. Urban combat was a nightmare for any armored unit. Narrow streets, rubble-strewn intersections, and hidden anti-tank positions waiting around every corner. For the Pershing crews, each building could conceal a Panther or a Tiger, each alley a trap. In the streets of Cologne and later in smaller towns like Remagen, the Pershings led assaults with infantry support. German defenders had dug in, using barricades and improvised obstacles, hoping to funnel tanks into kill zones. The first shots rang out in the morning mist. A Panther fired from a crumbled building corner. Its round shattered nearby concrete, but the Pershing pressed forward. The 90mm gun roared, a single shell punching through the Panther's side armor, igniting its engine. Smoke filled the narrow street. Infantry cheered as the enemy tank went up in flames, while Pershing crews adjusted and moved toward the next target. Another encounter erupted at a bombed-out factory. German soldiers fired from rooftops and window slits. Anti-tank rifles rattled against Pershing armor, bouncing harmlessly. The tank's mobility allowed it to weave through debris, while its gun targeted enemy positions with devastating accuracy. Buildings collapsed, sparks flew, and the Pershings kept advancing, unyielding. German officers were stunned. Their heavily fortified urban positions, once thought nearly impenetrable, were being systematically dismantled by these reliable, powerful machines. By the end of the day, multiple Panthers and a Tiger II had been destroyed, and the Pershing's path cleared for infantry and artillery to secure key objectives. These urban battles demonstrated what field reports had hinted at for months. It wasn't just firepower or armor that made the Pershing effective. It was its ability to survive, maneuver, and maintain momentum in the most chaotic conditions. Where German tanks often faltered under pressure, the Pershings kept moving, striking, and reshaping the battlefield in America's favor. One of the Pershing's greatest advantages wasn't on the battlefield, it was behind the lines, in the realm of logistics and maintenance. While German engineers had created technically impressive tanks, their complexity came at a cost. Panthers and Tigers required specialized crews, constant repairs, and spare parts that were often scarce in the final months of the war. A broken transmission or overheated engine could immobilize a tank for days, leaving it vulnerable or forcing it to be abandoned entirely. American forces approached armored warfare differently. The Pershing was designed with simplicity and durability in mind. Its transmission, engine, and final drives were robust, tested under extreme conditions, and could be repaired quickly by crews with basic mechanical training. Field manuals were straightforward, and spare parts were plentiful, thanks to the U.S. industrial machine running at full capacity. In one engagement near the Rhine, a Pershing took multiple hits from German 88mm guns and a direct hit from a Panther's main cannon. The tank's tracks were damaged,
and smoke billowed from the engine compartment. Within 30 minutes, a crew of mechanics had the vehicle back in action, its gun operational and ready to fire. The same scenario for a Panther might have meant a permanent loss of the tank. This reliability allowed American armored units to operate with unprecedented tempo. Pershings could advance daily, traverse rough terrain, and remain combat-ready for weeks at a time. German units, on the contrary, often found their best tanks sidelined or abandoned due to mechanical failure. Battles were lost not because of courage or tactics, but because the machines themselves could not endure the demands of prolonged combat.
The Germans began to record these observations in after-action reports. One officer noted that, quote, "The American tanks move relentlessly, and their crews are able to repair and return to battle faster than we can replace our broken machines." The Pershing had become more than just a weapon. It was a force multiplier, its endurance reshaping the way armored warfare unfolded in the final months of Europe's war. As spring 1945 approached, German forces were retreating but desperate to hold key positions along the Rhine and into central Germany. The M26 Pershings were at the forefront of this push, spearheading assaults against entrenched German defenses that had long been considered nearly impenetrable. In the dense forests and river valleys of Hesse and Thuringia, Persian units encountered a mix of Panther battalions and remaining Tiger IIs. The Germans, aware of the Pershings' growing reputation, attempted to set ambushes, utilizing terrain, mines, and anti-tank guns. Smoke from burning villages and the roar of artillery filled the air as tanks clashed in chaotic, close-quarters combat. One particularly intense engagement unfolded near a crossroads in the Rhine Valley. Two Pershings moved forward under fire from a concealed Tiger II. The first shot from the German tank destroyed a supporting half-track, but the Pershings advanced, returning fire with precision. The Tiger's armor absorbed several hits, but the Americans adjusted their aim, targeting weak points and flanking when possible. After a tense exchange, the Tiger II was disabled and the remaining German crew retreated. In another town, Pershings led urban assaults through narrow streets and rubble-strewn intersections. German infantry attempted to stop them with anti-tank rifles and improvised explosives, but the Pershings' armor shrugged off small arms fire. Each advancing tank cleared the way for infantry and artillery, transforming previously defended streets into open corridors for Allied forces. These encounters highlighted a critical lesson for German commanders. The Pershing was not just a tank. It was a machine capable of enduring repeated punishment, maintaining mobility, and delivering decisive firepower. Unlike the fragile Panthers and Tigers, which could be rendered useless by a single mechanical failure, the Pershings kept moving, striking, and supporting the larger advance. By the time the Americans reached the heart of central Germany, the Pershing had earned a reputation that no amount of German bravado could deny. The combination of firepower, armor, and reliability had turned what could have been a costly armored engagement into a testament to American industrial and engineering superiority. While the M26 Pershing's engineering and firepower were remarkable, it was the tank crews who truly brought it to life. Operating a heavy tank in combat was not just a matter of mechanics, it was a test of nerves, coordination, and bravery. Crews trained rigorously to master the Pershing systems. Every member had a role. The commander coordinated movements and targeted enemies, the gunner aimed and fired the 90mm cannon, the loader ensured rounds were ready, the driver maneuvered through treacherous terrain, and the assistant driver monitored communications and assisted with repairs. In battle, split-second decisions meant the difference between survival and destruction. In one encounter near the Ruhr, a Persian crew faced a small German ambush. Panther shells struck the streets around them, hurling debris and creating smoke-filled chaos. The crew remained calm, following training and relying on the tank's reliability. The gunner lined up shots, the loader supplied ammunition quickly, and the driver maneuvered around obstacles. Within minutes, the ambush was neutralized. Veterans recall that the Pershing's predictability and durability gave them confidence. Unlike previous tanks that might stall or jam under fire, the Pershing could be counted on to respond. Soldiers could focus on strategy and tactics rather than constantly worrying about whether their tank would break down. These human stories illustrate the synergy between American engineering and the men who operated it. The Pershing was more than metal and machinery. It was a partner in battle, giving crews the tools to take on the heaviest German armor with skill and courage. In letters and diaries, crew members described the sense of awe they felt facing Panthers and Tigers. They had learned to respect the power of German engineering, but the Pershing allowed them to fight back effectively. Each engagement was a test of nerves, coordination, and endurance, and the tank's performance gave them a fighting chance where none had existed before. By combining human skill with mechanical reliability, the M26 Pershing became an unstoppable force on the European battlefield, turning tense encounters into victories and leaving a lasting mark on armored warfare history. By April 1945, the Pershings were pushing deep into southern Germany and Austria, leading the final offensives that would end the war in Europe. The terrain varied from dense forests to river valleys and urban centers, demanding tanks that could combine firepower, mobility, and endurance. In the Bavarian countryside, Pershing units encountered last-ditch armored formations. Panthers and a few remaining Tiger IIs attempted to slow the American advance. Ambushes were set along narrow mountain passes, but the Pershing's crews, relying on experience and training, maneuvered carefully. Smoke, explosions, and the crack of cannon fire echoed through valleys as the tanks engaged the enemy. One particularly intense engagement near Munich highlighted the Pershing's capabilities. A column of Pershings advancing through the city was suddenly fired upon from multiple angles by German tanks and anti-tank teams. The lead Pershing absorbed direct hits while returning fire, disabling a Panther and forcing a retreat of another. Infantry units followed closely, clearing buildings and securing strategic positions. The coordination of tank and infantry, supported by the Pershing's durability, proved decisive.
Elsewhere in Austria, Pershings faced natural obstacles such as rivers, steep inclines, and destroyed bridges. German forces had hoped the terrain would slow the American advance, but the Pershing's mobility and mechanical reliability allowed units to continue forward, often finding alternative routes when standard paths were blocked. Tanks that might have faltered under such conditions remained operational, allowing American forces to maintain relentless pressure on retreating German troops. By the time the Allies crossed into central Austria, the Germans were in full retreat, and their once feared armored vehicles were either destroyed, abandoned, or mechanically broken. The Pershings had not only matched German tanks in combat, they had outlasted them. These final offensives demonstrated the strategic value of the M26 Pershing. It was not merely a weapon of brute force. It was a reliable, versatile, and practical machine that allowed American armored units to maintain tempo, seize objectives, and dominate the battlefield in the final months of the war. After Germany's surrender in May 1945, military analysts began a comprehensive evaluation of the M26 Pershing. Field reports, captured German documents, and crew testimonies were compiled to understand how this relatively new tank had influenced the closing battles of the European theater. The findings were clear. The Pershing had excelled in three critical areas. First, firepower. The 90mm gun had allowed American crews to engage and destroy even the heaviest German tanks effectively. Second, armor. The Pershing could withstand hits that would have destroyed earlier American designs. And third, reliability. Unlike German tanks, the Pershing could operate for long periods without mechanical failure, even under extreme combat conditions. German after-action reports confirmed the Pershing's impact. Commanders noted that American tanks consistently survived engagements that would have crippled their own forces. Mechanically, the Pershing outperformed Panther and Tiger tanks in real-world conditions, demonstrating that durability and simplicity could outweigh technical sophistication in prolonged warfare. The lessons learned influenced future American armored vehicle design. The M46 Patton, the M47, and later main battle tanks all incorporated the principle of balancing firepower, protection, and reliability, an approach proven on the battlefields of Germany. Engineers emphasized components that could be maintained by crews under combat stress, ensuring operational readiness remained high even in harsh conditions. The Pershing's success also reshaped military thinking. Tanks were no longer judged solely by technical specifications or armor thickness.
Instead, their effectiveness was measured by combat endurance, crew usability, and ability to sustain operations over time. The Pershing had proven that a well-designed, reliable tank could neutralize technically superior enemies and decisively influence the course of battles. Its legacy would endure beyond World War II, serving as a blueprint for modern American armored warfare and solidifying the Pershing as one of the most important tanks in U.S. military history. While technical reports and battle outcomes tell part of the story, the human experience aboard the M26 Pershing brings it to life. Veterans who operated these tanks often spoke of the combination of power, reliability, and reassurance the vehicle provided during the most harrowing combat situations. Crew members recounted navigating destroyed villages and bombed-out streets under fire from Panthers, Tigers, and hidden anti-tank teams. One gunner recalled a night engagement near a small German town. German rounds slammed into nearby buildings, sending debris flying, but the Pershing kept moving. Every hit that might have disabled a Sherman left the Pershing operational, allowing the crew to return fire and suppress enemy positions. Another veteran described the tension and thrill of ambushing a hidden Panther units. Smoke, rubble, and the sound of artillery created chaos, yet the Pershing's stability and gun accuracy allowed the crew to methodically engage targets. The Panther's return fire missed its mark, and within minutes the American tank had destroyed the German vehicle and secured the area for advancing infantry. Letters and diaries from Pershing crews often emphasize a recurring theme: confidence. Soldiers trusted their tank in ways they had never trusted previous models. It wasn't invincible, but its durability and firepower meant they had a real chance to survive engagements that previously would have been nearly suicidal. These stories reveal more than heroism. They show the strategic value of combining engineering excellence with trained, disciplined crews. The Pershing allowed Americans to fight smarter, press advantages, and maintain momentum even in the most challenging conditions. In the final months of the war, the tank and its crews became a symbol of American industrial ingenuity, skill, and perseverance. The story of the M26 Pershing is a story of innovation, perseverance, and adaptation. Introduced at the very end of World War II, it faced the ultimate test: German armor that had dominated battlefields for years. Yet in every encounter, the Pershing proved its worth, not through flashy technology, but through a combination of firepower, armor, and most importantly, reliability. From the forests of the Rhine to the streets of Cologne, from urban ambushes to open field engagements, the Pershing demonstrated that practical engineering could triumph over complexity. German tanks, impressive on paper, often failed under real combat conditions. The Pershing, designed with lessons learned from years of armored warfare, kept advancing, firing, and surviving where others faltered. Its impact extended beyond individual battles. The Pershing reshaped Allied tactics, allowing American forces to engage German heavy armor with confidence. It influenced post-war tank design, instilling the principle that durability, maintainability, and combat readiness were just as critical as raw firepower or armor thickness. Veterans remember the Pershing not just as a machine, but as a partner in combat. It allowed them to survive, to fight effectively, and to achieve objectives once thought impossible. Letters, diaries, and interviews preserve the memory of those tense, fiery moments when the tank roared through streets, forests, and valleys, standing against the feared Panther and Tiger.
Ultimately, the M26 Pershing was more than a heavy tank. It was a symbol of American ingenuity and industrial strength. It proved that engineering for reliability and practicality could change the course of battles, and that in the chaos of war, a machine that keeps moving, that keeps firing, can make all the difference. The Pershing's legacy endures in modern armored warfare. Every tank that followed carried lessons learned from its design, its deployment, and the men who trusted it with their lives. In the annals of history, the M26 Pershing stands as a testament to the idea that sometimes the most effective weapon is the one that simply keeps going when everything else fails.